Hi, my name's Matt Geiger. I wanted an overview of the gun control debate that wasn't tainted by the bias from either the left or the right. So when I couldn't find one on my own, I decided that I would just need to go out, do the research myself, and present as close to an unbiased take as possible. In this video, I'll go through common gun control talking points on both sides of the debate and either debunk, confirm, or provide some nuance around them. So let's just hop in and get started. One of the most common figures you hear from the pro-gun control camp is that 40% of gun sales occur in no questions asked transactions, meaning people take advantage of the gun show loophole to avoid background checks. So we need to dig deeper into that 40% number. The source of that is a 1994 phone survey asking about gun sales within the last 2 years. The timeline's really important because the Brady Act, which required background checks for the first time ever, only went into effect 8 months prior to the end of the study period. So in other words, the majority of the study didn't even include the impact of mandatory background checks. On top of that, there were only 251 respondents, and the majority of those didn't even buy the gun themselves, but they acquired the gun through gift or inheritance. So clearly this figure shouldn't be cited anywhere. When a politician uses this 40% figure, you know they either don't know what they're talking about or they're actively trying to mislead you. So what studies are out there on the source of illegal guns? A study of convicts in Chicago found that 37% of guns were purchased legally from a dealer by a straw man. So that is a friend or family member of the criminal who doesn't have a felony on their record. So the purpose of the straw man is to legally pass that background check on behalf of somebody else. Now we'll flip to a gun rights point. A common point made by gun enthusiasts is that actually relatively few people die from guns. They claim gun incidences are just high profile when they do happen. So according to CDC statistics, there were over 33,000 deaths from firearms in 2013, which is the last year available. So that puts it in the same ballpark as the number of traffic deaths. So there's no doubt, clearly it's a major problem that can't be dismissed so quickly. But on top of that, each side likes to downplay or upplay certain types of firearm deaths to sell their own point of view. So here are the actual stats. The interesting thing is that suicide makes up almost 2/3 of shooting deaths. Homicides make up the other huge chunk, about 1/3 of shooting deaths. And that disproportionately affects Black and Hispanic men. The victim of 51% of all homicides are Black men, with Hispanic men making up another 14% of homicide victims. Next point. Gun control advocates claim that high-capacity ammo magazines aid mass shootings and should be banned. On the other side of the aisle, they say people need them for self-defense against multiple assailants. Based on my research, I found it takes an untrained shooter less than 3 seconds to change out an ammo magazine, and most actual mass shooters have carried multiple guns anyways. So the truth is probably that high-capacity ammo magazines don't save or cost lives. There certainly isn't any way to unequivocally check either side's claim. But either way, it definitely wouldn't make any significant dent in the thousands of homicides each year. Next talking point. More gun control leads to fewer suicides versus the opposing view that gun control laws and lower gun ownership rates do not prevent suicide. The best study I found on this one is a Harvard School of Public Health study that found a strong link between gun ownership and gun suicide. Now keep in mind that's gun suicide, which makes sense because if there are more guns, the method of choice for suicide is more likely to be with guns. But there's a major problem with that, and that's that guns are way more fatal than other forms of suicide. Gun suicide is 85% fatal, but compare that to other common suicide methods like poisoning at 2% and cutting at 1%. So clearly the suicide method makes a huge difference. Next point, gun control advocates claim mandatory safety features would reduce accidental deaths. And there are a number of studies that indicate that that actually is true. But keep in mind, as we saw earlier, less than 2% of gun-related deaths each year are accidental deaths. And a number of states have already passed the mandatory safety features that a lot of people call for. So I'd agree with the statement, but warn you to keep some perspective and keep in mind the other gun-related issues impacting so many lives on a regular basis. Moving on. A core disagreement between the two sides is the effect a gun has on a conflict. Gun control advocates argue that the presence of a gun makes a conflict more likely to become violent, and in other words, making a dangerous situation even more deadly. Gun rights advocates argue that people need the ability to defend themselves and feel safe, and they argue that good guy with a gun argument. The truth is that situations on both sides of the debate are rare. Both sides have misrepresented various studies to either prove or disprove either sides. The truth is that we can't objectively decide that either side is correct, and likely it depends on a lot of factors, most importantly, the culture of the area where the incident happens. Next point. The two sides argue about the nature of the Second Amendment. One side says it's only intended for militias, which really don't exist anymore, so that basically means that it's null and void. The other side claims that the right lies with an individual gun owner and not the collective militias as a group. The Supreme Court on that one has sided with the gun rights side, and they interpret the Second Amendment as an individual right. So now, you as an individual can like that or you can dislike it, but same as you can like or dislike any other law. But because of the Supreme Court's ruling, that became a fact. You can argue that the addition of a more liberal judge or two would just change that ruling as if the meaning is constantly in flux, but that's just highly unlikely. All courts rely on the precedent of previous decisions, and there are very few judges in history that have been so bold as to just totally toss out precedent without a very convincing change of the facts. Next is the debate over assault weapons. One side argues that civilians shouldn't own military-grade firearms. The other says that these types of weapons are used for hunting and sports and are no less powerful than hunting rifles. My take is that both sides overstate the impact or necessity of assault weapons. First off, less than 1% of gun deaths are caused by what are called assault weapons, so we're dealing with relatively small numbers here. On top of that, the term assault weapon is thrown around to make them sound scary, but the definition of these guns in past bills has always been nearly worthless. Not surprisingly, the 10-year assault weapon ban from 1994 to 2004 hasn't been found to reduce gun violence. On the other hand, your most common assault weapons do have higher muzzle velocities and larger ammo magazines than the most common hunting rifles, so saying that they're no more dangerous than hunting rifles isn't quite fair either. The next argument centers around gun control statistics. The most commonly cited gun control stats on both sides are the ones looking at the correlation between gun laws, gun ownership, gun deaths, and crime in a variety of places. Groups on both sides will compare studies performed in different countries and states to prove their points, comparing a state or a country before and after laws are passed, comparing states with gun control measures to states without, or comparing countries with and without high rates of gun ownership. But I'm not even going to bother focusing on any specific one of these studies or even groups of studies as a whole, because the truth is that there's no proven across-the-board causation between gun ownership, gun control, and homicide rates to support either side's claim. The studies are usually regionally specific and depend on a ton of different geographical and cultural factors that help explain why gun control or gun ownership made gun deaths increase or decrease. What I've discovered from doing this video is that both sides of the debate clearly have no shame in telling half-truths or even outright lies to sell their own views. The mentality by Democrats and Republicans alike that the ends justify the means is just morally wrong, and it hurts our country as a democracy by crushing truthful information and a fair dialogue. Hopefully this video plays a little part in combating that misleading information that's out there in the system. Thanks for watching.